Alara Vance stood amidst the oppressive stillness of Blackwood Manor's East Wing library, the late afternoon sun failing to adequately penetrate the accumulated grime of decades. The air was a stagnant brew of decaying paper, dry rot, and the faint, persistent memory of sea brine that clung to everything within this lofty structure perched above New Seagate. Alara, whose mind preferred the clean certainty of columned ledges, felt acutely uncomfortable with this tangible mess inherited from her estranged great-uncle Silas. Her fingers, accustomed to the smooth ivory of a quill, trembled slightly as they brushed the brittle surface of the parchment map spread upon the heavy mahogany table. It was more than old, it felt ancient imbued with a silence that swallowed the industrial cacophony rising from the port below. The hum of the distant shipyard, the clatter of iron, the cries of gulls, seemed 1,000 miles removed from this isolated sanctum. She traced the alien coastline depicted, the ink so profoundly dark it seemed to absorb the weak light filtering through the arched window. This was not the familiar, ordered geography of the Duchy of Karzala. The symbols marked near the central, unervingly named island, *or Ethel*, were not mercantile markers but cryptic astronomical notations, suggesting Silas had charted courses through waters heedless of terrestrial authority. Alara, a creature of the lower-tier exchange, where profit dictated every move, found herself adrift in the mystery of her relative, the captain who reportedly returned with the ocean in his eyes. Why hide such a thing beneath a loose floorboard in the seldom-used solar? It felt like a deliberate, final challenge left for her practical mind. For the first hour, she attempted to rationalize the find, flipping through Silas's other effects, a sextant crusted with verdigris, a logbook filled with arcane mathematical scribbles she couldn't decipher. The map, however, resisted logic. She briefly considered taking it to Dalton Fellwinter, the mercenary she occasionally hired for protection when retrieving valuables from shadier city corners. Dalton's pragmatism might offer a way to assess its immediate danger. Yet, Dalton's reputation was tethered too closely to the established power structures, namely the Vesper Guild, who she suspected might already be circling Blackwood, eager for any hint of Silas's forgotten ventures. This map felt dangerous enough to warrant secrecy, a secret that might save her from the inevitable intrusion of House Vesper's grasping agents. As the sun dipped further, casting long, accusing shadows across the room, the map itself seemed to subtly shift under her gaze. A phantom sensation, the dizzying lurch of a ship caught in a sudden swell, washed over her, followed by the sharp, metallic taste of salt spray mixed with ozone. It was a physical manifestation of the map's strangeness. Alara pushed back from the table, the leather chair scraping loudly against the polished wood floor, a sound suddenly too loud in the echoing hall. The solitude of the manor, once a brief refuge from the city's demands, now felt like a trap. She knew, with the cold certainty that accounted for debts and duties, that this parchment was a key. A key that unlocked not riches, perhaps, but an entirely different, far more perilous set of ledgers, those kept by the sea and the stars, far beyond the jurisdiction of New Seagate's Duke. The decision crystallized. She needed expertise beyond the tidy confines of the exchange, and she needed it before the smog of the lower city swallowed the secrets of the upper bluff hole. Her pragmatic nature demanded she understand the risk before she could decide how to liquidate, or defend, this final asset of Silas Blackwood. By the time the first true dawn touched the granite peaks of New Seagate, Alara had made her choice, packaging the map securely within oilcloth and placing it deep within her travel satchel. She left the dusty halls of Blackwood to the silence of the morning air, the mansion itself seeming to exhale a sigh of relief at her departure. Her destination was the Fishtown district, the sprawling, pungent belly of the city where the raw industry of the docks festered alongside illicit trade and ancient maritime law. To navigate there required descending from the relatively clean air of the bluffs through the manicured avenues of the citadel, a place where even the shadows seemed well dressed, down into the choking smog layers of the lower tier, where the sun rarely touched the cobbled streets. Her journey took the better part of the morning. She paid handsomely to avoid the common transport barges, instead taking a small, private cable car normally reserved for guild couriers, affording her a brief, unsettling aerial view of the city's hierarchy, the white marble of the Duke's palace, the sprawling, interconnected rooftops of the merchants, and finally, the chaotic sprawl of Fishtown, a tapestry woven from splintered wood, rusting iron, and perpetually damp fishing nets. The air grew heavy, thick with the smell of brine, stale beer, old fish, and the acrid smoke of cheap coal. Alara, dressed in serviceable but plain traveling clothes, moved with a practiced anonymity that surprised even herself. She was seeking the Blue Anchor Society, a collective rumored to be less a formal organization and more a network of old sea dogs and those who preferred the company of ghosts and legends to living magistrates. Navigating the narrow, overlapping alleyways of Fishtown was a trial in itself. The ground seemed perpetually slick, and the sunlight, when it managed to break through the overhangs, only illuminated patches of grimy activity. She observed the denizens, sailors with faces like cured leather, arguing over dice, shifty-eyed dockworkers loading cargo that smelled suspiciously metallic, and children darting through the crowds like silverfish. Her careful inquiries, layered with coin and the mention of Captain Silas Blackwood's name whispered in specific taverns, finally led her to a cramped, low-ceilinged establishment named the Barnacle's Rest. The interior was dark, lit primarily by a few sputtering oil lamps, and the clientele looked appropriately weathered and suspicious. She spotted a likely candidate leaning against the bar, an older man whose beard was intricately braided with small, brass rings, clearly a retired master mariner of some distinction. She approached cautiously, her movements mirroring the hesitant quiet she noticed in the hobbit mage, Fay Meadowbrook, when she first encountered her at an alchemical supply depot years ago, a quiet respect for the power of the unknown. "I seek knowledge regarding the charts of the late Captain Silas Blackwood," Alara murmured, placing a silver piece discreetly on the scarred wood near the man's elbow. "Specifically, islands unmarked by the Admiralty. The Blue Anchor Society, perhaps, keeps such unique records." The man, whose name she later learned was Grizz, eyed her with a skepticism as thick as the ale foam before him. "Blackwood, that old sea devil chased shadows. The Anchor keeps old secrets, girl, not madness. But secrets cost more than silver." He pocketed the coin with surprising speed. Grizz spoke of the map's markings in vague, fearful terms, tales of star charts that described horizons not yet discovered, and inks drawn from depths where light did not penetrate. He directed her to an even deeper recess of Fishdown, a subterranean chamber beneath an abandoned warehouse, where an elderly woman, a former cartographer for Silas, allegedly kept his true, working collection, demanding not coin, but a promise Alara knew would likely involve immediate danger, the kind Dalton Fellwinter usually specialized in diffusing, though she was alone now. This descent into the physical and moral low point of the city had cost her half a day, but she held the faint, hopeful glimmer that the price of the map's secret might soon be revealed. The journey to the sub-level chamber beneath the abandoned warehouse in the foulest corner of Fishdown was a descent both literal and spiritual. Alara had to rely on Dalton's old advice: trust the shadows, move without sound, and never look anyone directly in the eye unless prepared for a fight. She navigated corridors slick with stagnant runoff, the only sound the drip-drip-drip of unseen leaks and the distant, muffled roar of the sea struggling against the stone foundations. The air here was frigid, damp, and carried the metallic tang of iron rust and stagnant water, a far cry from the comforting dust of Blackwood Manor. She found the chamber accessible only via a rusted grate hidden beneath a stack of rotten pilings. Inside, the space was surprisingly dry, lit by an array of glowing fungal colonies that cast an eerie, phosphorescent green light over a chaotic collection of charts, globes, and navigational instruments. Sitting at a makeshift desk, painstakingly repairing a torn piece of sailcloth, was an old woman whose hands were stained deep indigo, the cartographer Grizz had mentioned, Lyra. Lyra possessed the frail appearance of a scholar long divorced from sunlight, yet her eyes, when they focused on Alara, were piercingly intelligent. "Blackwood's ghost sends his last inheritor," Lyra stated, her voice a dry rasp. "He promised me peace, not this constant haunting. That map you carry, it details the approach to Ethel. It is a place where the sea itself is suspect." Alara presented the map again, watching the faint, oily lines seem to absorb the green light. "I need to know what it is, and why Silas kept it hidden." Lyra leaned close, the glow illuminating the web of wrinkles around her eyes. "The ink is ground comet dust mixed with the blood of deep-water leviathans. It reacts to magnetic north anomalies that don't exist on this plane. Silas believed Ethel was not merely an island, but a temporary convergence point, a place where the edges of our reality fray. He sought the unbound compass, rumored to reside there, an artifact that supposedly allows one to navigate not just space, but time itself, or perhaps, just different versions of this world. The Admiralty fears it, the Vesper Guild hunts for the resources Silas claimed to have found near it." Lyra then presented the cost. "I will not take your coin, girl. It is tainted by the city's grasping hands. I need protection. Lord Vesper's agents, the Glimmering Hand, they have been circling the docks, asking too many pointed questions about Silas's final shipment manifests. They seek confirmation of his successful voyage, believing Ethel holds untapped veins of sky metal. I need you to intercept a ledger that one of Vesper's solicitors, a man named Rorik, carries. It contains proof of Vesper's initial illegal funding of Silas's last disastrous expedition. Bring me that ledger, and I will give you the full navigational sequence to decipher the map's final leg." This was the bargain Alara had feared, a direct confrontation with the mercantile power she spent her life trying to avoid. To refuse was to remain ignorant, trapped by an inherited mystery. She agreed, the word feeling heavy as lead in her mouth. She spent the remainder of the day planning. She needed tools, perhaps some subtle distraction, and crucially, she needed someone with true field experience. She recalled that the legitimate ferry captain operating out of the lower-tier docks, a resolute woman named Captain Kalen, who navigated the often patrolled waters near the citadel, was rumored to possess a fierce disdain for Vesper's monopolies. The plan formed: infiltrate the guild's mid-level archives near the docks during the evening shift change, retrieve the ledger from Rorik, and then secure passage on Kaelin's ship under the guise of an urgent family emergency requiring travel toward the uncharted northwest. The shadows lengthened over Fishdown as Alara climbed back out of the crypt, the green fungal light replaced by the harsh, yellow glare of gas lamps reflecting off the wet cobblestones. The simple life of accounting felt impossibly distant now. The scent of brine and comet dust clung to her resolve. The evening descended upon New Seagate with the swiftness of a drawn curtain, bringing with it a dense, soupy fog that rolled in from the sea, perfectly obscuring the finer details of Alara's movements. This fog, the seasonal breath of the Southern Ocean, became her cloak as she moved toward the mid-level administrative offices of House Vesper, located surprisingly close to the bustling, legitimate piers, allowing them access to both finance and swift maritime escape routes. The ledger Lyra demanded was reputedly locked in the temporary office of Rorik, the solicitor currently compiling Silas's final financial dissolution papers for Lord Vesper. Alara knew direct confrontation was suicide against the Glimmering Hand's seasoned agents. She needed misdirection. She utilized the skills she learned managing chaotic accounting firms, timing and exploiting known weaknesses. She bribed a disgruntled clerk in the adjacent customs house, paying him enough coin to ensure he looked the other way for a crucial 15-minute window during the routine evening roster swap. Her focus remained sharp, channeling the meticulous nature she usually reserved for balancing year-end accounts. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs, much faster than when facing an audit, yet she moved with a controlled grace, a necessity born from traversing the dangerous gaps between tiers of the city. She slipped into Rorik's temporary office. The room was opulent but sterile, reflecting Vesper's cold efficiency. The ledger was indeed on the heavy oak desk, bound in dark red leather, resting near a half-empty decanter of fine brandy. As Alara reached for it, a voice, sharp and cultured, cut through the silence. "A rather bold accounting practice, Miss Vance. Are you auditing us personally?" Lord Vesper himself stood in the doorway, flanked by two heavily armored guards whose polished breastplates seemed to catch and reflect the dim gaslight. Vesper, tall and impeccably dressed, surveyed her with an expression of mild annoyance rather than fury. He was playing a game. "I suspected Silas Blackwood left more than debts. I suspected he left potential assets. You have the map, I assume. Do not insult my intelligence by denying it." Alara's mind raced. She couldn't fight these men. Dalton's absence was acutely felt. Her only weapon was the leverage Silas's secrets provided. She held the red ledger loosely. "Lord Vesper, this document details not assets, but your illegal financing of an expedition based on unverified charts that imply non-duchy territorial claims. If this ledger surfaces at the Citadel Tribunal, your reputation, built over centuries, dissolves faster than sea foam." Vesper gave a humorless smile. "A sound analysis, accountant. But leverage requires publication. I have secured the docks. Even if you escape, where will you sail? The Navy watches the usual channels." This was the opening she had prepared for. "I do not intend to use the usual channels, my lord. I intend to chart a course beyond them." She retreated slightly toward a service window, tossing the ledger not at Vesper, but toward a pre-placed heavy blanket near the window. As Vesper's attention momentarily shifted to his guard retrieving the crucial book, Alara vaulted over a small desk, smashed the window with her elbow, wincing at the sharp sting, and scrambled onto the narrow sill. She dropped 20 feet onto the roof of a nearby, lower storage shed, the impact jarring her bones, before sliding down a fire escape into the relative safety of the lower-tier thoroughfares. The sounds of shouting and clanging armor followed her, but the sound of the sea was calling louder. She reached the modest ferry landing where Captain Kaelin maintained her seaworthy but unpretentious vessel, the Stillwater. Kaelin, a woman whose frame spoke of years wrestling ropes and weathering storms, looked at Alara's torn clothing and wild eyes with immediate understanding. "Vesper's hounds are loud tonight, accountant. What urgent business drags you toward the Veil Deep?" Alara wasted no time explaining the map's true nature, showing Kaelin a small, tantalizing sketch Lyra had quickly provided of a potential deposit of sky metal. Kaelin, valuing independence and despising Vesper's suffocating control over the sea lanes, agreed to the charter, demanding an exorbitant sum, payable upon their return, or proof of the destination's value. The agreement was struck near midnight, under the dim lantern light of the slipway. The Stillwater * would set sail before the morning tide, pointed toward the grey, foreboding expanse marked unnavigable waters on every official chart, leaving the manufactured order of New Seagate far behind. The next week was a brutal, magnificent re-education for Alara Vance. The Stillwater *, under the capable command of Captain Kaelin, was sturdy, but the journey into the Veil Deep was anything but smooth. The relentless, bone-jarring motion of the small ferry through the heavy, unnatural currents was a constant physical assault. Each dawn brought a wash of grey light, thick with moisture and chilling winds that seemed to carry whispers from the abyssal depths. Gone was the structured schedule of the exchange. Their days were now governed by the relentless, erratic temper of the sea, punctuated only by meager, shared meals of hardtack and preserved fish, eaten quickly while tethered to the deck rails to avoid being swept overboard. Alara quickly learned the difference between theoretical navigation and real seamanship. Kaelin, whose competency was a stark contrast to the incompetence she associated with the city's official naval officers, taught her the basics of compensating for phantom tides and reading the unnatural shifts in cloud formations that Lyra's copied notes had predicted. The compass needle, as Lyra warned, spun wildly near their approximate destination, forcing them to rely solely on Silas's archaic star charts, which Alara, slowly, painstakingly, began to decode. This required intense focus, often late into the night, the vast, star-dusted darkness pressing in around them, an infinitude that made the petty squabbles of New Seagate seem utterly meaningless. During one particularly violent squall, where the waves rose like dark, liquid mountains, Kaelin nearly lost control. It was then that Alara, driven by a cold, focused clarity, a far cry from the frightened accountant who discovered the map, managed to secure a loose boom that threatened to crush the small cabin. She moved not with brute strength, but with precision, tying off the line in a complex knot Kaelin barked at her to use. Kaelin looked at her then, not with the wary deference given to a rich passenger, but with the respect accorded to a survivor. You have the sea in your blood after all, accountant. Or perhaps, Kaelin mused over the roaring wind, you simply hate failure more than you fear the water. As the seventh day broke, the unnatural fog began to coalesce into a distinct, towering wall ahead. Lyra's final calculations indicated they were approaching the convergence zone. The water beneath the Stillwater asterisk turned an inky, unsettling black, and the air grew strangely warm, carrying the faint, metallic scent of ozone Alara had first experienced in the library. The map, now fully activated by the proximity to Ethel's influence, pulsed faintly in Alara's pocket. She finally understood Silas. He hadn't been mad, he had simply discovered a world where the rules she lived by held no dominion. The comfort of ledgers and predictable profit margins had been shattered, replaced by the terrifying, exhilarating promise of true discovery. Alara looked back toward the direction of New Seagate, now completely swallowed by the haze, and felt no regret. She had exchanged certainty for destiny, and as the Stillwater asterisk cut silently into the unnatural boundary of the fog, Alara Vance braced herself, no longer just an inheritor, but an explorer on the cusp of a secret that could redefine the known world, prepared to face whatever phantom Captain Silas had left waiting on the shores of Ethel.